The medical station called Serenity's Edge floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower, its lights blinking against the endless black void that surrounded it on all sides. Commander Marcus Cole had never planned to end up here. But life in the galaxy rarely followed anyone's plans. He had been standing in the middle of peace talks between two alien species when the pain hit him like a hammer to the chest. And before he knew what was happening, his legs gave out and the cold floor rushed up to meet his face. The next thing he remembered was waking up on a bed that was too hard and too narrow, surrounded by sounds he did not recognize and smells that made his nose burn. The medical bay was a place of chaos and noise, filled with creatures of every shape and size imaginable, some with too many arms and others with no arms at all, some covered in scales and others wrapped in what looked like living smoke. Refugees from a border war had flooded the station, and every bed was taken, every doctor was running from patient to patient, and every machine was beeping with urgent warnings that nobody had time to check. The Arvinthus was one of those doctors, and he had not slept in almost 3 days. He was a Calvary, a species known for their 4 arms and their skin that glowed with soft blue light when they were calm. But right now his skin was flickering like a broken lamp because he was anything but calm. His eyes burned with exhaustion, and his hands shook slightly as he moved from one patient to the next, trying to save lives faster than they were slipping away. There were too many patients and not enough time. Not enough medicine, not enough of anything. When the human was brought into Base 7, Vinthus barely looked at him. Another patient, another body on another bed, another life depending on him to do his job correctly. Scanner on the wall was supposed to show him the patient's species and medical history, but the system was overloaded and running slow, and Vinthus did not have time to wait. He looked at the bed number. Instead, Base 7 was supposed to hold Ambassador Krethfor, a Dracorian diplomat who was suffering from a disease that was eating away at his neural pathways. The Dracorian species was made of silicon rather than carbon, and they required a very special medicine to heal their unique biology. That medicine was called Compound Vex 9, and it was one of the most powerful substances in the known galaxy. Vientos pulled a vial from his medical kit and held it up to the light, watching the silver liquid swirl inside like liquid metal come to life. This compound was designed to break down cellular walls and rebuild them at 10 times the normal speed, forcing the body to heal itself whether it wanted to or not. For a Dracorian, it was a miracle cure that could save them from almost any illness. For almost every other species in the galaxy, it was pure death in a bottle. The doctor moved to the bed and looked at the patient lying there, but his tired eyes saw what they expected to see, rather than what was actually in front of him. He saw a figure with the right general shape, lying in the right bed, and his exhausted brain filled in the rest of the details without question. He did not notice that this patient had soft skin instead of hard scales. He did not notice that this patient had only 2 arms instead of 4. He did not notice that this patient was breathing oxygen instead of methane. He simply pressed the needle against the patient's arm and pushed the plunger down, sending the entire dose of Compound Vex 9 flowing into the bloodstream of Commander Marcus Cole. The human did not even flinch. Vientos pulled the needle back and disposed of it properly, already turning his mind to the next patient, the next crisis, the next life that needed saving. But then the scanner on the wall finally finished loading, and a soft chime filled the air as the patient's information appeared on the screen. The doctor glanced at it without much interest, expecting to see the Dracorian ambassador's file. Instead, he saw something that made all 4 of his hearts stop beating at the same time. SBCIs, human origin, Earth class, Death World Survivor Medical Alert. Carbon-based lifeform do not administer silicon-based thermoenderments. For a long moment, Vinthus could not move, could not breathe, could not think he stared at the screen with his mouth hanging open and his glowing skin turning from flickering blue to solid gray, which was the Calvary color of absolute terror. He had just injected a human with compound Vex 9. He had just killed this man. There was no other way to understand what had happened, because no carbon-based species had ever survived contact with Vex 9, not even in tiny amounts. And he had given this human the full dose meant for a creature 3 times his size. The compound was already in the human's blood, already spreading through his body, already beginning its terrible work of tearing his cells apart and trying to rebuild them in a way that human biology could never. Supervintos rushed to the human side and grabbed his wrist, feeling for a pulse with trembling fingers. The pulse was there, steady and strong. But that meant nothing, because the compound took time to work its way through a body within an hour. The first symptoms would appear within 3 hours. The major organs would begin to fail within 6 hours. This man would be dead. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The doctor leaned close to the human's face and saw that his eyes were starting to flutter open, consciousness slowly returning after whatever had caused him to collapse in the first place. Vientos knew he had to tell him the truth, even though the words felt like broken glass in his throat. "I am so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking with guilt and fear and exhaustion and despair, all mixed together into something that barely sounded like words at all. "What I gave you, humans would not survive this." The human's eyes opened fully, confused and unfocused, trying to understand where he was and what was happening. "You have perhaps 6 hours, Vientos continued, his skin now completely gray and his 4 hands shaking so badly he had to clasp them together to make them stop. "I will make you comfortable. I will stay with you. I will do everything I can. But I cannot save you." 6 hours until what?" the human asked, his voice rough and dry. Vientos closed his eyes because he could not bear to look at the man he had just condemned to death. "Until your organs liquefy." But even as the words left his mouth, something strange was happening on the monitors above the bed. Something that made no sense according to everything Vientos had ever learned in his 200 years of medical training. Humans' vital signs were not dropping. They were stabilizing, and somewhere deep inside, Marcus Cole's body, 4 billion years of evolution on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, was waking up and getting ready to fight. Dr. Vientos stood frozen beside the bed, his forearms hanging limp at his sides as he stared at the monitors with an expression of complete disbelief. The numbers on the screen were wrong. They had to be wrong, because what they were showing was simply not possible according to every law of medicine he had ever studied. When compound Vex 9 entered a carbon-based body, it was supposed to trigger an immediate cascade of cellular destruction that no immune system could hope to fight. The compound was designed to tear apart cell walls at the molecular level, ripping them open like paper and forcing them to rebuild in new configurations for a silicon-based Dracorian. This process was healing because their bodies were built to handle that kind of stress for everyone else. It was like setting off a bomb inside every single cell at the same time. The human should have been showing signs of cellular breakdown within the first few minutes. But instead, his heart rate was steady at 72 beats per minute, and his blood pressure was completely normal. His temperature had spiked briefly to 39 degrees, which would have been concerning under normal circumstances. But then it had dropped back down to 37, as if his body had simply decided that the fever was no longer necessary. "This is not possible," Vientos whispered to himself, reaching out with one hand to touch the monitor, as if physical contact might reveal that the whole thing was just a malfunction. But the numbers did not change, and the human on the bed continued to breathe in slow, steady rhythms that showed no sign of the agony that should have been tearing through his body. Marcus Cole was fully awake now, and he was looking at the alien doctor with a mixture of confusion and concern that seemed Entirely wrong given the situation. What do you mean my organs are going to liquefy? He asked, pushing himself up onto his elbows despite the weakness in his limbs. What did you give me? Vintas tried to find the words to explain, but his translator implant seemed to struggle with the weight of what he needed to say. There was a mistake. He finally managed. His skin still gray with fear. You were placed in the wrong bed, and I thought you were someone else, and I gave you a medicine that your species cannot survive. Cannot survive? Cole repeated, and now there was the fear that Vintas had expected to see from the beginning. Are you saying I am dying right now? You should be, the doctor admitted, and he pointed at the monitor with a trembling finger. According to everything I know about medicine and biology and the way that compound VEX-9 interacts with carbon-based life, you should be experiencing extreme pain right now. Your cells should be falling apart, and your organs should be beginning to fail. He paused and looked at the human with eyes that held equal measures of terror and wonder. But none of that is happening. And I do not understand why. Cole looked down at his own hands, turning them over slowly, as if he expected to see them melting before his eyes, but they looked perfectly normal. 5 fingers on each hand with short nails and the calluses of someone who had spent years working with tools and weapons. I feel fine, he said slowly. And even as the words left his mouth, he seemed surprised by their truth. I mean, I feel tired and a little bit sore, but I do not feel like I am dying. Vintas did not know how to respond to that. So instead, he grabbed his medical scanner and began running it over the human's body, checking every organ and every system for signs of the damage that should have been spreading like wildfire. Through his cells, what he found made him drop the scanner on the floors. The compound was definitely inside the human's body. He could see it clearly on the scan, flowing through his bloodstream and touching every tissue it encountered. But instead of destroying those tissues, something else was happening. Something that Vintas had never seen before in all his centuries of practice. The human's immune system had recognized the compound as a threat and had launched a response. But not the kind of panicked, futile response that other species showed before they died. This was something different. Something organized and almost intelligent in the way it moved. White blood cells were surrounding the compound, molecules, and taking them apart piece by piece, learning their structure and developing countermeasures in real time at the same time. The parts of the compound that were trying to tear apart cell walls were being met with resistance, as if the cells themselves had received a warning and had reinforced their defenses. Your body, Vintas said slowly, his voice barely louder than a whisper. Your body is fighting back. Cole looked at him with confusion written across his face. Is that not what bodies are supposed to do? The doctor let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob, and his skin flickered from gray to a pale purple that indicated emotional overwhelm. Not like this, he said, shaking his head. No species in the Galactic Union has an immune system capable of adapting to compound VEX-9. We have tested it on hundreds of different life forms, and the result is always the same. He waved his forearms at the monitors that surrounded the bed. Death. Always death, within hours at most, and usually much faster than that. But the human was not dying. And with every passing minute, it became more and more clear that he was not going to die. At least not from this. Other doctors had begun to notice what was happening in Bay 7, and a small crowd was gathering around the bed. Aliens of a dozen different species, all staring at the human with expressions that ranged from disbelief to fascination to something that looked almost like fear. Vientos waved them back, protective of this patient who should have been his victim. And he spoke quickly in the medical language that all doctors on the station were required to learn. Get me a full blood workup. Get me tissue samples. Get me everything we have that can record what is happening inside this body. He turned back to Cole, and now his skin was shifting to a bright gold color that indicated hope and excitement and the thrill of discovery all mixed together. "I do not know what is happening to you," he admitted, "but I think we are witnessing something that the galaxy has never seen before." Cole leaned back against his pillow and took a deep breath, trying to process everything he had just heard. "So I'm not going to die?" "I do not think so," Vintus replied, and he almost smiled despite everything that had happened. "In fact, I think you might be doing something much more interesting than dying." "What do you mean?" The doctor pointed at the scanner readings that were now displayed on every monitor in the bay, drawing the attention of everyone who could see them. "I mean that your body is not just surviving the compound," he said with wonder in his voice. "Your body is learning from it, adapting to it, incorporating it into your own biology." He leaned closer to the human, his four eyes wide with amazement. "I have never seen anything like this in my entire life. And I have been a doctor for longer than your species has had space travel." Cole did not know what to say to that, so he simply lay there and tried to understand how a mistake that should have killed him was turning into something that might change everything. The galaxy thought it knew about humanity, and somewhere deep inside his cells, a battle was raging that would not end until his body had either conquered the compound or been destroyed by it. But with every passing second, it was becoming more and more clear which outcome was going to win. The first 12 hours were the worst 12 hours of Marcus Cole's entire life, and he had lived through things that would break most people. It started with a heat that seemed to come from inside his bones, a burning sensation that spread through his body, like fire through dry grass, until every inch of his skin felt like it was on the edge of melting. He threw off the thin blanket that covered him and still felt like he was trapped in an oven. Sweat pouring from his body in rivers that soaked the bed beneath him. Dear Vintus never left his side, not for a single minute, and he watched with terrified fascination as the human's body went to war against the compound that was trying to destroy it. The fever climbed higher and higher, passing 40 degrees and then 41, and then climbing even further until the temperature sensors began to flash warnings that nobody on the station had ever seen before. "This is impossible," one of the other doctors said. "A thin creature with gray skin and eyes like black pools. No carbon-based life form can survive a core temperature above 42 degrees. The proteins in their cells begin to break down, and—" "I know what is supposed to happen," Vintus interrupted sharply, his four hands busy adjusting the cooling packs that surrounded the human's body. "But look at him. He is still breathing. His heart is still beating. He's not dying." And Cole was not dying, even though everything said he should be, even though his body was reaching temperatures that should have cooked his brain inside his skull. Instead, he was fighting. And even in his delirium, he seemed to know that he could not stop the hallucinations started around hour 6. And they were vivid and strange, and filled with images from Earth's long and bloody history. Cole muttered about plagues that had swept across continents and killed millions, about the Black Death that had taken half of Europe and the Spanish flu that had circled the globe, about diseases that should have ended humanity but instead had made them stronger. Talked about radiation and how humans had walked through the ruins of nuclear disasters and survived, about poisons that other creatures could not touch, but humans had learned to drink for pleasure, about a planet that seemed determined to kill everything on it, but had instead created the most stubborn creatures in the galaxy. Vientos listened to every word, and he began to understand something that the Galactic Union had never fully grasped about the species they had welcomed into their community with such casual confidence. Humans were not fragile at all. They came from a world that had been trying to murder them since the first cells crawled out of the ocean. A world of earthquakes and volcanoes and ice ages and meteor strikes and predators with teeth like knives and bacteria that could kill in hours. They had survived all of it, and more than survived, They had conquered it, and their bodies carried the memory of every battle in their very cells around hour 10. The convulsions started, and Vinthus had to call for help to hold the human down before he hurt himself. Cole's muscles locked and released in waves that seemed to follow no pattern, his back arching off the bed and his teeth grinding together hard enough that the doctor worried they might crack. But still, he did not die, and still his body continued to fight, and still the monitors showed that somehow, impossibly, he was weighing the other doctors had given up trying to help and had instead turned to simply recording everything that was happening, filling data storage devices with information that would be studied for decades to come. They watched through the observation glass with expressions of wonder and horror mixed together, unable to look away from the impossible thing that was happening right in front of their eyes. "His cells are rebuilding," one of them announced, reading from a scanner that was connected directly to the human's bloodstream. "The compound is still tearing them apart, but they are rebuilding faster than they are being destroyed." Vinthus nodded without taking his eyes off his patient. "I know," he said softly. "I have been watching it happen for hours now. But how?" the other doctor demanded, throwing up hands that had too many fingers. "How can a species with no natural armor, no venom, no regenerative abilities, how can they possibly survive something like this?" Vinthus thought about what the human had said in his fevered dreams, about all the ways that Earth had tried to kill its children and all the ways they had refused to die. "I think," he said slowly, choosing his words with care, "that we have been measuring the wrong things when we tried to understand humans." He gestured at the writhing figure on the bed, at the body that was currently enduring temperatures and stresses that would kill almost any other species in the galaxy. We looked at their soft skin and their small teeth and their lack of natural weapons, and we decided they were weak. His skin glowed a deep blue as a new understanding settled into his mind. But their strength was never on the outside where we could see it. Their strength is in here, in their cells, in their blood, in the 4 billion years of survival that lives inside every single one of them. At hour 18, Marcus Cole opened his eyes. The fever was gone. The convulsions had stopped, and the monitors showed vital signs that were not just normal, but actually better than they had been. When he first arrived at the station, Vinthus leaned over him with awe, 4 hands clasped together in a gesture of profound relief. "How do you feel?" he asked, and his voice was rough from 18 hours of talking and worrying and praying to gods. He did not really believe in Cole. Took a moment to consider the question seriously, moving his arms and legs and taking deep breaths to test whether his lungs still worked properly. "I feel," he started, and then he paused with a look of confusion on his face. "I feel good, actually, better than good." He sat up slowly, and Vinthus did not try to stop him because the monitors confirmed that there was nothing wrong with him anymore. "My shoulder," Cole said, reaching up to touch a spot where Vinthus knew there had been old scar tissue from an injury years ago. "It does not hurt anymore. It has hurt every morning for the past decade, but now it just feels normal." The doctor ran another scan, and what he found made him sit down heavily on the nearest chair. "The compound," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your body did not just defeat it. Your body used it." "What do you mean?" Vinthus looked at the human with eyes that held something very close to awe. "The parts of compound Vex 9 that are designed to rebuild cells, your body figured out how to use them. Your old injuries are healing. Your muscles are stronger. Your bones are denser." He shook his head slowly, still unable to fully believe what he was seeing. "You should be dead. Every single thing I know about medicine says you should be dead. But instead, you are better than you were before." Cole looked at his hands again, and this time he saw what he had not been able to see before. The small scars that had covered his knuckles were gone. The skin was smooth and new, like he had never been hurt at all. "Is this permanent?" he asked. "I do not know," Vinthus admitted. But I think we are going to find out together. Because I'm not leaving your side until I understand exactly what your body has done and how." The human smiled. And despite everything he had just been through, it was a genuine smile full of warmth and even humor. "Well," he said, "I guess that means we are going to be spending a lot of time together and outside the observation glass." A crowd of alien doctors looked at each other with expressions that said the same thing without any of them needing to speak. Galaxy had just changed, and it was going to take a very long time to understand exactly how. Word of what happened on Serenity's edge spread through the galaxy faster than light itself could travel, carried by communication networks that connected 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 space stations within hours of Marcus Cole's recovery. The story had reached the central systems of the Galactic Union, and within days, it had become the only thing anyone could talk about. A human had survived Compound Vex 9, not just survived, but thrived, and emerged from the experience stronger than before. Scientists and doctors and military leaders from dozens of species began making their way to the station, all of them wanting to see the impossible, human with their own eyes, and study the biology that had done what no biology should be able to do. Cole found himself poked and prodded and scanned so many times that he lost count, giving blood samples and tissue samples and even samples of his hair and fingernails to researchers, who treated each piece of him like it was made of solid gold. Through it all, Dr. Vinthus stayed by his side, partly out of the guilt that still gnawed at him for making the mistake in the first place, and partly out of a genuine fascination that had grown into something like friendship. "They want to take you apart and figure out how you work," the doctor told him one evening when the endless parade of scientists had finally left for the day. "Some of them have been very direct about that." Cole raised an eyebrow at this information. "Take me apart?" "Not literally," Vinthus assured him quickly, his skin flickering with embarrassment, "or at least not most of them. But they want to understand your biology in ways that will require extensive testing and probably years of research." He paused and looked at the human with all four of his eyes. "The Galactic Union is very interested in what you can do. And when the Union gets interested in something, it tends to get what it wants." Cole leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms over his chest, a gesture that Vinthus had learned meant the human was thinking carefully about something. "What exactly does the Union think I can do?" The doctor pulled up a holographic display and began showing Cole the research that had been conducted over the past few days. Data and charts and genetic analyses that painted a picture of human biology that most of the galaxy had never seen before. They tested your blood against 17 different compounds that are normally fatal to carbon-based life, Vinthus explained. Pointing at a section of the display, your immune cells began adapting to each one within hours, finding weaknesses and developing countermeasures. He moved to another section of the display. They expose your tissue samples to radiation levels that would kill a Kelvari in minutes. And while your cells did show damage, they also showed an ability to repair that damage that we have never documented in any other species. Cole watched the data scroll by without fully understanding all of it. But he understood enough to see what the doctor was trying to tell him. "You are saying that humans can survive things that other species cannot." "I am saying much more than that," Vinthus replied, and his skin glowed with the gold color of excitement. "I am saying that humans may be the most adaptable species in the known galaxy, and nobody realized it because we were looking at the wrong things." He pulled up a file that showed Earth, the small blue planet that humans called home, and Cole felt a surge of something like homesickness at the sight of it. "Do you know what a Class 12 death world is?" Vinthus asked. Cole shook his head. "It is the highest danger classification that the Galactic Survey gives to planets," the doctor explained. "Worlds so hostile to life that the fact any species evolved there at all is considered almost miraculous. He pointed at the image of Earth. Your planet is a Class 12 death world, one of only 7 in the explored galaxy, and you are the only intelligent species to have evolved on any of them. Cole looked at his home with new eyes, thinking about all the things that Vinthus had mentioned, the plagues and the predators and the natural disasters that had shaped human history. I never thought of Earth as particularly dangerous, he admitted. I mean, I knew it could be harsh sometimes. But every planet has its challenges. Vinthus made a sound that Cole had learned was the Calvary equivalent of a disbelieving laugh. Your planet has active volcanoes that can bury entire cities in ash, he said. It has ocean waves that can destroy coastal regions without warning. It has storms that spin fast enough to tear buildings apart. It has diseases that can spread across continents in weeks. And it has predators that evolved specifically to hunt creatures like you. He spread all 4 of his arms wide. Most species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that were stable and calm and relatively safe. Worlds that gave them time to develop intelligence without constantly trying to kill them. His skin shifted to a deep purple that indicated profound respect. Your species evolved on a world that was actively trying to murder you for 4 billion years. And instead of dying, you became this. He gestured at Cole's body, at the cells that had fought off a compound designed to destroy them and had come out stronger on the other side. You became survivors at the most fundamental level possible, with bodies that refuse to give up and immune systems that learn from every attack and minds that find ways to overcome any obstacle. Cole sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything he had just heard. The Union wants to use this, he said finally. And it was not a question. Of course they do, Vinthus confirmed. The military applications alone would be worth more than most planetary economies. Imagine soldiers who can survive almost any chemical attack. Workers who can function in environments that would kill anyone else. Explorers who can adapt to worlds that are currently impossible to colonize. His skin darkened slightly. Some of them want to take samples of your genetic material and try to apply it to other species, to give them the same survival abilities that humans have. Would that work? I do not know, the doctor admitted, and neither does anyone else. But they are very eager to find out. The next day, Vinthus was called to present his findings to the Union Medical Council, a gathering of the most senior medical and scientific minds in the entire galaxy. He stood before a room of hundreds of beings, each more important and influential than the last. And he told them everything he had learned about human biology and the impossible thing that Marcus Cole's body had done when he finished. There was a long silence that seemed to stretch across the entire chamber. Finally, an ancient Deshan, who had been practicing medicine since before humanity discovered fire, rose from her seat and asked the question that everyone was thinking. What does this mean for the galaxy? Vinthus took a deep breath and answered, with words that would be quoted in scientific journals and political debates for generations to come. It means that we have made a critical error in our classification of humans, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was saying. We looked at their lack of natural armor and their absence of claws and their need for specific atmospheric conditions. And we decided they were fragile. He paused and looked around the chamber at all the different species gathered there. But humans are not fragile at all. They are persistence predators at the cellular level. Survivors who carry 4 billion years of biological warfare in their blood. His skin glowed bright gold as he delivered his final conclusion. What kills other species makes them stronger. And we should be very, very glad that they chose to join our community as allies rather than as conquerors. The chamber erupted into noise as hundreds of beings began talking at once, arguing and debating and trying to understand what this meant for the future of every species in the vast galaxy. And somewhere on the other side of the station, Marcus Cole sat alone in his room and looked at his hands. wondering what the galaxy was going to do now that it finally understood what humans really were. 3 days after Marcus Cole should have died, he was discharged from the medical bay with a clean bill of health and something new flowing through his veins. The compound that should have killed him had become part of him now, integrated so completely into his biology that it could not be removed even if he wanted it gone. The Galactic Union scientists had been very clear about that, running test after test to confirm what they could barely believe: that a human body had taken a poison and turned it into medicine through nothing but pure biological stubbornness. On his last morning on Serenity's Edge, Cole received a visitor in his quarters, not a doctor or a scientist this time, but a Union ambassador. A tall being with silver skin and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies in their depths. "Commander Cole," the ambassador said, folding her many-jointed fingers together in a gesture of formal greeting. "I am here to make you an offer on behalf of the Galactic Union." Cole gestured for her to sit down, and she settled into a chair that had been designed for species much different from hers. "What kind of offer?" "The kind that most beings in this galaxy would give everything they own to receive," she replied, her voice smooth and musical despite the translator that converted her words into something Cole could understand. She pulled out a data crystal and placed it on the table between them in exchange for exclusive research rights to your biology. "The Union is prepared to offer you a seat on the High Council, a personal fleet of ships to command, an income that would make you one of the wealthiest individuals in known space, and a guarantee of protection for Earth and all human colonies for as long as the Union exists." Cole looked at the crystal without touching it. "That is a lot," he admitted. "You are worth a lot," the ambassador replied. "What your body can do, what it has already done, could change the course of medicine and warfare and exploration for every species in the galaxy." She leaned forward, her strange eyes fixed on his face. "Imagine soldiers who can fight in environments that would kill any normal being. Imagine workers who can survive industrial accidents that would be fatal to anyone else. Imagine colonists who can settle worlds that are currently too dangerous to approach." Her voice became even more persuasive. "All of that is possible because of what lives inside you. And if you agree to let us study it, we could spread that gift to billions of beings across thousands of worlds." Cole sat in silence for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened since he collapsed in that negotiation room. He thought about the pain of the fever and the terror of knowing he was supposed to die. He thought about Vinthus and the guilt in the doctor's eyes, and the way he had stayed by Cole's side for 18 hours, waiting for the end that never came. He thought about Earth and all the ways his home had tried to kill humanity and all the ways they had refused to give up. And finally, he shook his head. "No," he said. The ambassador's silver skin flickered with something that might have been surprise or might have been anger. "No? Do you understand what you are refusing?" "I understand perfectly," Cole replied, keeping his voice calm and steady. "I understand that you are not offering me a gift. You are offering me a cage." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars that filled the endless darkness of space. "If I give you exclusive rights to my biology, then I become property of the Union for the rest of my life. I become a specimen to be studied and a resource to be exploited, and humanity becomes just another asset to be managed." He turned back to face her. "That is not what we are, and that is not what I am going to let us become." The ambassador collected the data crystal and rose from her chair with movements that suggested she was not used to being refused. "You are making a mistake," she said coldly. "The Union will get what it wants eventually, with or without your cooperation." Cole smiled. And it was not a friendly smile, maybe, he agreed. "But you will not get it from me. Not today. Not ever." After the ambassador left, Cole waited alone in his quarters until the door chimed again. This time, it was Vinthus, his skin flickering with nervousness as he stepped inside. "I heard you refused the union's offer," the doctor said. "The whole station is talking about it." Cole nodded and gestured for his friend to sit down. "Are you here to tell me I made a mistake too?" Vinthus shook his head, and his skin shifted to a warm gold color that Cole had learned meant admiration. "I am here to thank you," he said. "When I made my mistake, when I injected you with that compound, I thought I had killed you." His forehands trembled slightly as he spoke. "I thought I was going to have to watch you die because of my carelessness, and I thought I would have to live with that guilt for the rest of my very long life." He looked up at Cole with all four of his eyes. "Instead, you survived, and you did something impossible. And now the whole galaxy is looking at humanity in a new way." Cole reached out and took one of the doctor's hands in his own, a gesture of comfort that transcended the differences between their species. "You stayed with me," he said. "When you thought I was dying, you did not run away. You did not try to cover up your mistake. You stayed by my side and tried to help even when you thought there was no hope." He squeezed the doctor's hand gently. "That means something to me." Vinthus made a sound that might have been a sob or might have been a laugh. "What will you do now?" he asked. "The Union will not give up just because you said no." Cole smiled and pulled out a data chip of his own, one that he had spent the last few days preparing while the scientists were busy poking and prodding him. "I am going to give this to you," he said, placing the chip in the doctor's palm. "It contains my complete medical records, everything about my biology, and everything that the scientists have learned about human adaptation." Vinthus stared at the chip with his skin flickering through a dozen different colors of shock and confusion. "Why?" he asked. "If you would not give this to the Union, why would you give it to me?" "Because the Union wants to use it to make weapons and soldiers and tools for conquest," Cole explained. "But you want to use it to save lives." He closed the doctor's fingers around the chip. "I am not giving this to an organization or a government. I am giving it to a doctor who cared more about his patient than about covering up his mistake." Cole walked to the door and paused before stepping out into the corridor that would take him back to his ship and his life and whatever the future held for him. "Now, use it wisely," he said. Looking back at his friend, figure out how human biology works. Find ways to help people heal from things that should kill them. Make the galaxy a little bit better because of what you learn. He grinned. And it was a real grin this time, full of hope and warmth on Earth. "We have a saying that what does not kill you makes you stronger." He touched his chest, right above his heart where the compound had done its impossible work. "It turns out that is literally true for humans. But I think the more important truth is that the galaxy is stronger when people help each other instead of trying to exploit each other." And with that, Commander Marcus Cole walked out of the medical station and into a galaxy that would never look at humanity the same way again. Vinthus stood alone in the quiet room, holding the data chip that contained the secrets of a death-world species, the key to medicines that could save billions of lives across thousands of worlds. It had been given freely, without conditions or demands, by a species that the galaxy had underestimated since the first day of first contact. Perhaps, he thought, that was the most human thing. Avalasi turned the chip over in his fingers. Reports were already coming in from the outer colonies. Stories of other humans volunteering for experimental treatments that would kill any other species. Stories of them surviving and adapting just like Cole had done, and somewhere in the dark spaces between the stars, older powers who had been watching the galaxy for millions of years finally turned their attention to the strange, soft, impossibly stubborn creatures from the little blue planet called Earth. The story of humanity in the galaxy was just beginning. And thanks to a mistake made by an exhausted doctor on an overcrowded space station, It was going to be a story unlike anything the universe had ever seen before. This was not the end of anything. This was the beginning of everything.